Snow fell in heavy, soundless sheets over the Wind River Range, turning the world into a blur of white and silence. Inside a small wooden outpost, half buried by the storm, Ryan Mercer sat motionless before a dying fire. He was in his late 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair streaked with early grey at the temples. A week's stubble shadowed a jaw hardened by time and regret. His eyes, pale steel blue, carried the faraway look of a man who had seen too much, lost too much, and no longer knew how to return. The fire's glow flickered across old scars on his hands, remnants of the explosion that had ended his team, and in many ways ended him. In his sleep, the past never stayed buried. He saw the desert again, heat shimmering over the sand, the smell of metal and smoke. His squad shouted through static-filled radios, and then there was light, deafening and white, swallowing everything. He woke to the echo of a single name, Travis, on his lips, the one man whose face he could never forget. Ryan sat up, chest tight, drenched in sweat despite the cold. Outside, the wind screamed like a living thing. The nightmare clung to him like frost to glass, refusing to melt. By the stove, Scout, his Belgian Malinois, lifted his head. The dog was 6 years old, his once golden coat faded to ashen grey around the muzzle, one ear nicked from shrapnel. His amber eyes were sharp, intelligent, too human for comfort. Ryan had saved him years ago, pulling him from the rubble of the same blast that took their unit. Since then, Scout had become both his shadow and his conscience. When the nightmares hit, the dog would rest his head on Ryan's knee, grounding him in the present. Tonight, though, Scout was restless, ears twitching, muscles tense. A sudden bark shattered the silence. Scout sprang to the door, claws scraping the wood. Ryan frowned. Out here, 50 miles from the nearest town, there was nothing. No travelers, no lights, no sound but the wind. Yet Scout's instincts had never failed him. Ryan grabbed his coat, an old military parka faded from olive to grey, and slung his rifle over his shoulder. When he opened the door, a wall of icy air hit him like a fist. Snow whipped across the porch, biting into his skin. Then he saw it. Far across the white expanse, high on the ridge, a red light blinked in the storm. Slow, deliberate. He narrowed his eyes, counting the intervals out of old habit. Dot, dot, dash. Dot, dot, dash, dot. His pulse quickened. It wasn't random. It was Morse code. And not just any message. It spelled out a single word. Echo 17. The same call sign as his unit, the one buried 8 years ago under foreign sand. For a long moment, Ryan stood frozen, breath clouding in the air, the red light flickering through the snow like a heartbeat from the dead. Then, without a word, he looked down at Scout. The dog's ears were forward, body quivering with tension. Ryan whispered, "Let's go, boy." Together, they stepped into the storm, chasing the ghost of a signal that should not exist. Morning came pale and brittle over the town of Lander, a thin sun fighting its way through the frost. In a small second-floor apartment above the post office, Grace Collins sat hunched over a cluttered desk. The woman in her mid-30s looked both fragile and unyielding. Slender, long brown hair tied carelessly, a freckle just above her left cheek. Her green eyes were sharp, restless, the kind that searched for truth even when it hurt. She wore an old Navy parka several sizes too big, once belonging to her husband, Captain Daniel Collins, an Air Force officer who vanished 8 years ago while serving in Echo 17, the same unit now whispering through static on her shortwave radio. The loss had carved quiet grooves into her face. Grief had become her second skin, but beneath it lived defiance. The radio on her desk crackled, a ghostly rhythm breaking through the white noise. She turned the dial slowly. Breath held. 3 short beeps, 1 long, 2 short again. Morse code. She had learned it from Daniel years ago, back when their evenings were filled with laughter and coded love messages tapped across the kitchen table. Now the sound made her blood run cold. She scribbled the sequence down on a yellow notepad, cross-referencing with the old military log her husband once kept. The letters spelled one word: Echo 17. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Daniel's unit. The same code that had been declared decommissioned after a classified explosion overseas. She stared at the blinking radio light, tears threatening but never falling. "If that's you," she whispered, "I'm coming." 2 hours later, Grace was in her old Ford Bronco, tires crunching over the icy back road leading toward the Wind River Range. The radio sat on the passenger seat, its faint signal growing stronger with every mile. Snowflakes lashed against the windshield, turning the world into a white blur. As she drove, her mind replayed Daniel's last call, his voice steady but urgent. "If something happens to me, promise you'll listen for me, Grace. I'll find a way to call you home." She had laughed then, thinking it was just his soldier's superstition. Now she wasn't so sure. Near the forest's edge, she pulled over beside an old ranger outpost. The storm had intensified, the wind howling through the pines like a choir of ghosts. Grace grabbed her backpack, slung the radio strap over her shoulder, and trudged through the knee-deep snow. She hadn't gone far when a shape emerged ahead. A man and a dog moving through the white haze. The man was tall, rough-looking, wrapped in a tattered military parka, his rifle slung low. His face was half hidden beneath a hood, but his stance carried the unmistakable caution of a soldier. When their eyes met, his expression sharpened. "Stay where you are," he called over the wind. His voice was low, authoritative. Grace stopped, raising her hands. "I'm not armed," she shouted back. "I picked up a signal, a code from Echo 17. The man's eyes narrowed. "Echo 17, he repeated, disbelief flickering. The dog, Scout, stepped forward, growling softly. He was a large Belgian Malinois, his fur dusted with snow, one ear scarred. Then, unexpectedly, he stopped growling and sniffed the air around her. His tail twitched once, uncertain. Ryan, she would learn his name soon, watched the animal carefully. "He knows that scent," he murmured. "Where did you get that coat?" Grace looked down, gripping the parka tighter. "It was my husband's, Daniel Collins." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind. Ryan's eyes darkened with recognition. "He was one of us," he said quietly. And just like that, two paths, one haunted by guilt, the other by grief, collided beneath a dying sky. The storm had turned violent by midday, hammering the Wind River Range with sheets of snow that devoured sight and sound. Ryan moved first, head bowed, rifle slung across his shoulder. Grace followed close behind, her breath misting in the freezing air, her boots crunching on the brittle crust of ice. Scout trotted between them, tail low, every sense alert. The wind roared like an unending scream across the slopes, shaking the old pine trees until their roots groaned. The three figures, man, woman, and dog, looked like small shadows swallowed by the white wilderness. They followed the faint pulse of the signal Grace's radio picked up, each blink of static leading them higher up the mountain. The temperature had dropped sharply. Even Ryan's military parka could barely keep out the cold. Yet what truly chilled him wasn't the air. It was the growing certainty that something, or someone, was waiting at the end of that signal. They reached a plateau by late afternoon, the storm momentarily thinning into grey haze. The ice beneath their boots gleamed like glass, fractured and ancient. At the far edge of the frozen lake lay a dark mass, half buried in snow. Ryan motioned for silence, crouching low. As they approached, the shape took form. The mangled remains of a military drone, its wings torn off, one turbine still faintly smoking as if it had just fallen. Grace gasped, her voice barely audible over the wind. "This is US Tech. An RQ-99 recon model," she said, recognition flickering across her face. Ryan gave her a quick glance. "You know that?" She nodded. "Daniel used to work with them before his deployment." The words caught in her throat. The memory of her husband felt closer here, as if he had just walked past. Near the wreckage lay a body frozen into the ice. Ryan knelt beside it, brushing away frost from the uniform sleeve. The face was burned beyond recognition, but the badge on the shoulder was still visible. Captain Reeve, his former team leader. Ryan's chest tightened. He hadn't heard that name in years. But then Grace spotted something else. Another dog tag, clutched in the corpse's hand. She pried it loose with trembling fingers and stared at the inscription. Daniel Collins. Her voice cracked. The world spun around her for a moment, her mind refusing to believe. Ryan froze, confusion and disbelief clashing behind his eyes. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Your husband wasn't even—" He stopped himself. Scout gave a low growl, nose twitching toward the tree line. The radio on Grace's shoulder emitted a weak hiss, then silence. Ryan opened the drone's side panel, expecting a charred interior, but the components were pristine. The freezing temperature had preserved everything, the circuitry locked in time like an insect trapped in amber. Inside was the data core, a palm-sized module flashing a faint blue light. He carefully detached it, his gloved fingers trembling. Before he could, "Examine it!" Scout's growl deepened, more urgent now. Ryan followed the dog's gaze. Across the lake, faint but visible, were tread marks, fresh, unburied by snow. Tracks of a snowmobile leading away from the wreck. Someone had been here recently, maybe still was. Ryan's instincts screamed to move. He stood quickly, scanning the white horizon. "We're not alone," he muttered. Grace clutched the dog tag to her chest, her eyes wet and wide. The cold wind rose again, swallowing their breath, and somewhere deep in the storm, a distant engine coughed to life. The sound of the snowmobile grew louder until a dark shape emerged through the wall of white. Ryan raised his rifle, motioning Grace to stay behind him. Scout stood tense, a low growl vibrating in his throat. When the vehicle finally stopped, a figure stepped off, tall and broad-shouldered, wrapped in a weather-beaten parka with military-grade gloves. His beard was flecked with frost, his face lined and hardened. The kind of face shaped by years of war and bad choices. His name came out of Ryan's mouth before thought could stop it. "Travis?" Travis Kane pulled down his hood, revealing sharp, storm-grey eyes and a faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He looked older than Ryan remembered, his once proud posture now carrying the weariness of a man who'd been hunted too long. "Still alive," Travis said with a bitter smile. "Didn't expect to find you chasing ghosts in my mountains." His voice was steady, but the edge of exhaustion and paranoia was clear. Ryan's grip tightened on the rifle. The last time he saw Travis was the night of the explosion, the night Ryan buried 8 men and a part of himself. "You have 10 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't shoot you." Travis sighed and slowly removed his gloves, raising both hands. "Because you've been chasing the wrong enemy, old friend." His breath smoked in the air. "The drone, this one here, it's not a new model. It's the same prototype that wiped out Echo 17. It was programmed to attack autonomously. I've been trying to prove it for years." Ryan's jaw clenched. "You expect me to believe you after you left us to die?" Travis took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "You think I ran? I dragged 2 of our men out of that crater before Command called me a traitor and sent hit squads to clean up. Ask yourself, why would they do that if I was lying?" Grace, still behind Ryan, studied Travis carefully. There was something haunted about him, something that mirrored the same torment she saw in Ryan. "You're saying the military caused the blast," she said, "and covered it up." Travis nodded once. "They needed a scapegoat. I became the ghost they buried, but I found pieces, data cores, crash sites. This one," he gestured toward the drone, "holds the final proof." Before Ryan could reply, Scout barked sharply, ears pricking toward the north ridge. The next moment, the world exploded with gunfire. Bullets shredded the snow beside them. Ryan tackled Grace behind the wreckage, shouting, "Down!" Travis dove beside them, pulling a compact pistol from his jacket. "Mercs," he spat. "They followed me. They want that data core destroyed." Scout darted into the snow, circling wide as Ryan returned fire. Shadows moved through the storm. 3, maybe 4 men, dark silhouettes with automatic rifles. Grace clutched her pack, trembling but alert, ducking as bullets slammed into the drone's wing. Travis looked at Ryan and yelled, "We move now! I know a cave half a mile east." Ryan hesitated for only a second before nodding. Together, they grabbed the core, called for Scout, and vanished into the storm, chased by the ghosts of men who should have stayed buried. The cave was a wound in the mountain, narrow and half frozen, the air thick with the metallic scent of snow and gun oil. Inside, the fire Travis managed to start crackled weakly, casting jagged shadows on the icy walls. Ryan sat apart, hunched over the drone's data core, his hands trembling as he worked to power it up with a portable unit. Grace knelt beside Scout, cleaning a gash along his shoulder with trembling fingers. The dog's fur, once sleek and bright, was now matted with blood and melting snow, yet his amber eyes never wavered from the cave mouth. Ever the soldier. Travis, his face drawn and tired, crouched near the entrance, pistol ready. The man's movements were slow but deliberate, shaped by long years of running and distrust. "They'll find us before dawn," he murmured. The blue light on the data core flickered, then steadied. Grace leaned closer, her breath fogging the air. "It's accessing," she whispered. Ryan's heart thudded. The small screen on the device sputtered to life, showing grainy infrared footage. 8 human silhouettes moving across a desert base, the thermal timestamp burned into the corner. Kandahar, 8 years ago. A voice, distorted but unmistakable, gave the order. Echo 17, initiate manual override, remove the core. Ryan saw himself on screen, his younger face hard but uncertain as he wrestled with a drone panel, sparks flying. Then the signal changed tone, a digital whine building to a scream. Travis's voice came faintly. "Ryan, pull it out now." The explosion followed, a blossom of heat swallowing the screen. The last frame showed 7 bright flares disappearing all at once. Silence filled the cave. Ryan's fingers loosened, and the device dropped to the floor with a dull clatter. His breath came shallow, eyes fixed on the frozen earth. "It was me," he whispered. "I was too slow." Travis shook his head. "No, you followed orders. The system failed." But the guilt settled deep into Ryan's bones, colder than the wind outside. Grace reached out, touching his shoulder gently. "Now you know the truth," she said softly. "And now we make it right." Her voice carried both sorrow and resolve. Outside, Scout's ears twitched. Then he growled low, his body stiffening. Travis was already on his feet, moving to the cave's mouth. Through the storm's grey haze, faint red dots danced across the snow. Laser sights. "They found us," he hissed. Bullets tore through the opening, chipping rock. Ryan dove for the rifle, Grace dragging the data core behind a boulder. Scout lunged forward, teeth bared, tackling one of the mercenaries who tried to enter. A shot rang out, sharp and final. The dog yelped, tumbling back into the snow. Grace screamed. Ryan's world narrowed to a single heartbeat. He pulled Scout into his arms, blood warm against his gloves, rage and grief fusing into something unbreakable. Travis fired back, short controlled bursts. "Ryan!" He shouted over the chaos. "We can't hold this position. That data, it's our only chance to tell the truth." Ryan clenched his jaw, glancing at the blinking screen, still showing the final seconds of Echo 17. He looked at Travis, and for the first time in years, there was no hatred left, only understanding. "Then let's finish it," Ryan said. "Let's send the signal." Snow lashed across the mountainside like shards of glass as Ryan and Grace half carried, half dragged the wounded Scout up the slope. The night burned with cold, the storm a white inferno. Behind them, gunfire echoed faintly, a dying heartbeat fading into the wind. Travis was gone, his last words still haunting Ryan's mind. "Don't let the truth die twice." His blood had already cooled by the time they slipped from the cave, leaving him buried beneath the falling snow. Grace's face was pale, streaked with soot and frozen tears, but her eyes burned with purpose. "We're close," she shouted above the roar. "The old radar station, just over that ridge." They reached the plateau where the remnants of an abandoned military outpost stood. Rusted antennas, half buried in ice, their solar panels faintly glinting under the lightning-streaked sky. Ryan's breath came in ragged bursts as he searched the control console. It was dead, but the auxiliary power indicator glowed faintly. Scout limped beside him, a streak of red trailing in the snow. The dog's fur, once thick and proud, was torn where the bullet had grazed him, yet his eyes still gleamed with fierce loyalty. Grace found a maintenance panel half collapsed under frost. "The batteries still hold charge," she said, voice trembling with both fear and awe. "If we link the data core to the transmitter, maybe, just maybe, it'll send." Ryan connected the cables, fingers stiff and bleeding through his gloves. The terminal flickered, spitting static. The drone's core blinked, blue, then green, then red. "No network," Ryan muttered. The satellite relay had long since died. He turned to Grace, his face hollow but determined. "We can still use light." She frowned. "Light?" "Morse," he said simply. He pulled the tactical lamp from Scout's harness, a compact, high-intensity searchlight, and pointed it toward the dark sky. With trembling hands, he began tapping the sequence. Each pulse cut through the storm like a heartbeat. Short, long, short. The cave footage, those terrible 5 seconds, converted into rhythmic bursts flashing across the mountain range. The ice and snow became mirrors, scattering the light into 1,000 reflections. Grace stood beside him, shielding the wind from the lamp as the pattern continued. Her cheeks were raw, her lips trembling, yet her voice broke through softly. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ryan didn't answer. He just kept pressing, faster now, sweat freezing against his brow. Scout whimpered softly, his breathing shallow, but he stayed upright, eyes locked on his master. In that moment, the three of them, man, woman, and dog, became the last pulse of something greater than themselves. Far beyond the storm, in a forgotten corner of the Rockies, a rusted military relay dish, abandoned for a decade, suddenly hummed to life. Its ancient receiver blinked red, capturing a faint coded transmission. Echo 17. The message, carried by light through snow and silence, had found its way home. 3 days later, the storm finally broke. Dawn spread over the peaks in bands of pale gold, melting the world back into color. The wrecked radar tower lay silent, half buried in snow, its solar panels glinting weakly in the sun. A distant rumble grew louder, the rhythmic thump of rotors slicing through the thin mountain air. A rescue helicopter appeared on the horizon, its red cross gleaming like fire against the endless white. Inside the cockpit sat Captain Elena Moore, a seasoned pilot in her 40s, her weathered face framed by short auburn hair streaked with grey. Her reputation for flying through impossible storms had earned her the nickname the Falcon. Stoic and decisive, she'd seen more wrecks than she could count. But something about this mission felt different. The coordinates came tagged with an encrypted signal from a decade-old call sign, Echo 17. When her team landed, they found the 3 figures half buried near the station. Grace was alive, her lips blue, eyes fluttering open as the medic checked her pulse. Ryan lay nearby, blood crusted at his temple, his arm twisted beneath him. His breaths were shallow but steady. And beside him, Scout, still, silent, his grey and white fur stiff with frost. Grace stirred weakly as they loaded Ryan onto a stretcher. "The dog," she rasped. One of the rescuers, a young man named Diaz, knelt beside Scout. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he whispered. "He's gone." But as they lifted Ryan, his hand brushed against Scout's paw. The contact was faint, accidental, yet when Ryan murmured hoarsely, "Echo," the dog's chest rose in the smallest breath. Its tail twitched once, barely perceptible. The medic froze, eyes widening. "He's alive!" By the time they reached the base hospital in Lander, news had already spread. The transmission Ryan sent had reached the military satellites and then every major network. The footage from the drone's core played across screens worldwide. Proof of a failed autonomous weapon experiment that had killed Echo 17 and framed its own men. Grace's husband, Daniel, was cleared of all accusations. The Pentagon issued a statement. For the first time in 8 years, the record was set right. Travis Kane's name appeared in headlines too. Whistleblower soldier dies exposing cover-up. The world called him a hero. Weeks later, as Ryan healed in a Wyoming rehab center, Grace visited often. Her face had softened, the hollow grief replaced by quiet strength. Together, they founded the Echo Project, a sanctuary for veterans and rescue dogs. Ryan, his body still bearing the scars of frost and war, worked beside volunteers, training service animals to help soldiers heal from PTSD. Scout, though slower now, became their symbol, the dog who refused to die, who carried truth through the storm. One evening, as the sun melted behind the Wind River peaks, Ryan sat on the porch with Scout at his feet. The old dog rested his, head on Ryan's boot, breathing slow and peaceful. Grace stood nearby, the wind catching her dark hair, her gaze on the horizon. The air carried a faint whisper, not of ghosts, but of gratitude. Ryan looked out across the fading light and smiled. "We made it home, boys," he murmured. Scout's tail gave one final gentle thump against the wood. Somewhere in the quiet, the mountains echoed back, a soft, eternal Echo 17. In the end, perhaps what happened on those frozen peaks wasn't just survival. It was grace. Some call it luck, others call it fate, but Ryan knew it by another name. A miracle from God. When all light was gone, a single spark still found its way through the storm, reminding us that even in our darkest hours, heaven still hears. In our lives too, we face storms we think will break us, yet faith can turn them into paths of purpose. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment, subscribe to, and may God bless every soul watching. May His light guide you through every battle, every storm, and bring you safely home.